All right, so right now it is 10:30 p.m. About 10:30 p.m. and I have a roommate who's sleeping because they gotta wake up early tomorrow to take an exam. So if I gotta lean back, I'm gonna have to bring my microphone back with me because I can't keep it too far, otherwise the volume will be low and I can't speak up too loud. Hopefully I don't have to do this twice. But anyways, today's topic is just about my evolution as a player since I first started playing at probably 3 or 4 years old up until now. I'm 30. I'll be 31 in 2 months. And I just want to basically explain how you can develop and grow as one type of player throughout your adolescence into early adulthood, and you have the ability to change your game, your position, your mentality, regardless of your age. And I know a lot of people believe that you can be that whenever you grow up playing one way, that you can't change, and at some point you become too old to change because you're set in your ways. But this story of mine is going to explain how if you have an open mind and you're willing to change, you can make that change. And I believe that the reason people believe that is because most people stay one way and they don't want to change their game, because a lot of the times when you change a position, you change a mentality, you're going to be poor at it, specifically in my case when you start, because you're going to expose yourself to certain criticisms, and you're going to have to be in a situation where you were probably really good at one position and then now you're opening yourself up to a lot of vulnerability in another position because you're having to show your weaknesses and where you're behind, so you're having to put yourself back. And then normally in these cases, after a while, you go back to old habits just because it's the easier thing to do. But you can grow up one way and you can change. Even though it's hard, even though a lot of people say it's not possible. And in my case, pretty much everyone at my age thinks it's impossible. Once you reach your mid-20s as an athlete, when you've grown up your whole life playing one style of play. But that's the summary of it, so I'll get into the topic right now. So what I'm gonna talk about first is my position and the role I played growing up. So as growing up, I played the center midfield, number 8 or number 10 position. So a lot of my game was focused on skills and dribbling people, passing, setting people up, creating plays from the midfield or from the defense to the attacking third. But it was based on creating plays and passing to other teammates and ball handling. I actually got a great joy in assisting other players for goals. As well as dribbling. That was another thing that I like to do. Play make. I just like to be the center of the game where everything stemmed from all the creativity. That's how I looked at it growing up. And my role models growing up were mainly Zinedine Zidane and Ronaldinho. And at the time these players were playing, the number 10 position, the attacking midfielder position, was the position. It was the main position. So Zidane and Ronaldinho growing up, they were the main dominant players in that era. So growing up, these are the players I looked up to. I wanted to do the skills that they did. I trained, everything I did revolved around their game. So it was highly technical, ball control, passing, creating plays, skills, creativity, and everything I did centered around this. So my mentality developed into the way that they played because I wanted to do things like them. And that was really what I grew up in. I didn't really know, I wasn't open to anything else at that time, because when I was growing up, those were the players. So those were the players I tried to mimic my game after. And so I ended up playing like this from the time I was like 3 or 4 to the time I was 18 years old. And I did play for my dad growing up, and he taught me to focus a lot on skills. And we didn't, as a team, we didn't learn the finishing aspect of the game. We learned how to pass the ball around, keep possession of the ball, create plays, but we didn't focus on the finishing part. But everything else, aside from that, leading up to the finishing part, we really focused on a lot. And like I said, I just reinforced a lot of those things through my favorite players. Anyways, after leaving club soccer at 18 years old, I then went to college at the University of South Florida. And this is where things would begin to change. So at 18, 19 years old, there was a team, Barcelona, with Guardiola, and they really were such a dominant team for quite a while, quite a few years, and they were so good that almost everyone thought that this was the best way to play. Like, they executed so well. So many people thought that was the best formation to play. So at this time, teams were transitioning. They were changing their formation. No longer was the number 10 as far as the focus of the team that was there when I was growing up. It was changing now. The formation was changing. The roles were changing. And this is something that also took effect into my college team. So now there was no more number 10. There were true center midfielders, and then number 6, but there was no number 10 creative player. Those players were now out wide, and these were the players known as forwards. They were not midfielders, they were forwards. And this is the transition I made in college. Is I no longer played a number 10. I had to be out wide as a creative player, because that was my game. The only thing is I didn't have the finishing part. So my mentality wasn't built like that. So I just had to make a huge transition. Apart from other things, I did have to make some other transitions, but just to stick to the topic, I had to change. This is where I started to change from a midfielder to a forward. And of course, my focus mentality wise was set up my teammates, focus on creating plays, creativity, possession. And the team that I went to really forced me to learn that there are other ways of playing apart from the way that I was used to growing up playing. And although I was a forward, I didn't really still understand the importance of scoring goals as a forward, and where you would be judged as a forward based on goals. So I was playing that position, but at the time when I was playing it at my college, it was really focused on contribution to the team, and it didn't have to be on goals. So although I learned a lot of overall positioning and a different style of play, I still didn't have goals ingrained in me, because I was being judged on how I defended, how I contributed to a goal, how I would play make, as long as it was contributing to goals. And this is, and if you actually look at my college review, I don't agree with it 100%. I think there is, in some ways, there's a lot of truth to it, but I don't believe 100% in how they evaluated me. For example, when they say I did a lot of tricks, unnecessary tricks, I don't agree with that, but I think when they say that, they may interpret that different from what I interpreted. For example, I may have used skills, and then their thinking is, so it wasn't useless skills, it was skills to beat a player, but then at the end of the day, they would say, okay, what did those skills lead to? So even though I may have beaten a player, maybe I beat two players, and then maybe I passed the ball, but at the end of the game, you're looking at, oh, you did all those skills, but what happened at the end of it? How many goals did you score? How many assists did you make? Specifically goals. So my critique, and I judged it differently at that time, but there's a lot of truth in what it said, but I didn't understand it at the time, because that's the first time that I came across this information. So it didn't hit me. But there's a lot of truth in the evaluation as far as, yeah, he's fast, he's quick, he's pacey, he has some skills, but what will be the end result? So after I got drafted, about 2 or 3 weeks I got an injury. I'm not going to go too much into that, but then after that injury I was dropped from Seattle Sounders, and then I had a decision to make. Either I go to the 4th division and play in Germany, or I go to a USL team. So my decision was, oh, I want to go to Germany, because that's where top soccer is being played. I initially had the chance to go to MLS and 4th division, but my father and I we made this decision to go to MLS first, because MLS has the exposure to all leagues in the world that the 4th division doesn't have. So I could have played in the MLS for a couple years, few years, and then moved to another league. But at the time, because after that injury from MLS, I was to go down to a USL or 4th division in Germany, so I chose 4th division in Germany. Now that's a whole nother story. I'm not gonna go into that, what happened, but I basically ended up going to the 7th division, and the player representative that told me that he had connections to 4th division ended up leaving me stranded. So I had to find my way and maneuver through that country by myself, but I'm not going to go into that. So I spent about 4 years in Germany. 4 years. I went there in 2014 and I left in 2018. Now in my time in Germany is where I truly learned and ingrained what it meant to be a forward, what it meant to be a striker, what you were going to be judged on. You can do all the moves, you can do all the passes, you can do all the creativity, but if at the end of the game you don't have a goal, then everything else you do is irrelevant. And this is the mindset I had to change. I was about 23, 24 at the time, because after the injury I had to take like almost a year break, and I was 23, 24 going to Germany at the time. So my first couple years, my first couple years is when I started to know that, okay, before every game, they're like, oh, how many goals are you going to get today? How many goals are you going to get today? And that was the first team I played on. It was there. I wouldn't say it was to the same degree as the team I went to later, but I just began to realize that it's about goals. It's about goals. All they talk about is goals, because at that time I was playing forward. I was playing like a number 9 forward, like a real forward. So that was a huge transition, because not only do you have to have the mindset, you have to have the skill set. But I would say, for me, developing the mindset is even harder to develop than the skill set. Although the skill set is very hard, it's the hardest thing to do in the game of soccer, is that end result. But the mindset for me was even more difficult as far as changing it. Not necessarily that it's harder, but as far as making a shift. So when I was at the second team that I moved to in Germany, this was when I internalized it as far as possible, as far as you humanly possibly could. I ingrained it and internalized it in my head that no matter what I do, you could play like the best player ever, but if my name is not attached to a goal at the end of the game, everything I did throughout that whole game is irrelevant. It would have been better for me to do nothing in the game and then score in the 90th minute. So and this is when I begin to, for the first time in my life, due to the inadequacy I had as a striker, I was playing a number 9 again for the most part. Sometimes I would play left forward, right forward, but for the most part I was playing as a striker. And for the first time in a game that I learned that I spent so much time, I felt inadequate. I felt lacking. I felt that I wasn't good enough. So I trained like hell. And I also trained a lot the 2 years before on finishing. I really did. But now it was just being so ingrained to me. I trained like hell. The finishing skill, the mentality skill. I would watch players like Ronaldo and Messi, how they just attack. That's all it's about. At the end of the game, these guys are dribblers, these guys are entertainers, but at some point, it's just attack, goal. So I had to change from a passing player, a dribbling player, creative player, to a guy who just thinks goals. So I had to develop the skill set. The skill set is so difficult, but then I had to change my mindset. And throughout this time, if you look at my statistics, it looked like there was zero improvement or negative improvement from the first time I came to my last year in Germany, even from my years in college to my later years in Germany. Maybe it looked like there was a slight, but it almost was like nothing had happened from the outside. So from the outside, it looked like nothing was happening from the statistics, but inside my mentality was changing. It's just that I would go in and out. Some games it would be there. Some games it wouldn't be there. Some games it would be there, some games not there. Some games more than other. And then you also have to take into the mind the skill set of finishing. So not only is it good enough to learn shooting and finishing on your own, but you also have to put yourself in game situations, because there's different types of finishing. There's one-on-one finishing in the middle, one-on-one finishing on the left, one-on-one finishing from the right, shooting outside of the box, curving this way, shooting outside the box, going this way. What happens when a defender's coming fast this way? What happens when a defender's coming fast this way? What happens when you control it and the goalkeeper's this way as opposed to this way? Or if there's just so many things. You have to put yourself in a position so many times to learn the best way to execute a shot, or what type of movement to make. Movement off the ball. Do I run this way? Do I come back? I mean, there's just so many nuances that you cannot explain. It's not enough to explain. You have to be in the game, because as a midfielder, as a number 8, as a number 10, your movement is different than as a number 9. So I had to learn the movements. I had to learn the dangerous runs. Normally I was used to coming back to get the ball as a midfielder, but now I had to run the dangerous runs. I had to learn the anticipation, cutting in front of the defender. And these are things that I learned. A lot of the times I put myself in good position, but the technique wasn't there, or it wasn't consistent enough. And this was in my mid to late 20s. And I knew it was changing, but no one else saw that it was changing. And I don't believe anyone else at that time ever thought that it would be ever possible to change. That was just my experience. But being in Germany, it was the first time that it was probably my biggest development as a player within 4 years. From all the time that I've played, that was probably my most development. A lot of people think your most important development is from when you're a kid, definitely before 18. I mean, there's different debates on when that is, but for me, I feel like my biggest development as a player within a short period of time is my time in Germany. So even when you look at where I was in Germany as a player and my level, it wasn't high, relatively speaking. My development was like this, even though it didn't look like that on paper. Statistically speaking, as a player, it was like this. And basically where I want to go with this is that I don't believe it's ever too late to develop a skill, and the most important thing is having the mindset and the willingness to want to grow as a player. There were so many times where I would put myself down. I would put myself down. I would be ashamed of myself. I would be ashamed of my game. I can't tell you how many games I was in Germany where after a game I couldn't even speak. My day, my week was ruined until the next game. And I would be pestered about by the fans of the team, by the coaches, by goals, we need goals every game. Before the game, you gotta make goals today, you gotta make goals. And I felt pressure, man. I'm not gonna lie, I felt pressure because I was inadequate at the time and I didn't have the skill set, but I stayed in that position and I didn't give up. And honestly, I would have stayed there even longer if it wasn't for problems with a visa, and then the amount of money that the visa wasn't that much of a problem, but just the amount of money I was being paid wasn't enough to keep living there. But I stayed and I persisted. I didn't give up. I wanted to stay in that position. I kept learning the skill and I just stayed with it. I studied videos of players that play that position, that excel in that position. I went out and trained as often as I could. And I was like a child. My mind was like a child, like I didn't know anything. So I seeked all this information. I didn't think that I knew it all. I wasn't, even though I felt ashamed, I was like, I know I can change this. So that's so important. You just gotta stick there. I was poor, but I was okay with being bad because I believed that I could improve it. So even though I was terrible, I was inadequate, I believed I could improve. So after my time in Germany, I came back to the States and I kept doing it. I kept working on the skill. And about a year into my time here, maybe 6 months into a year, it finally started to click. Not just the mindset was improving, but the skill set of finishing. Because in Germany, I had missed so many chances trying to figure out how to best score goals based on my positioning, where to run, where to move, how to finish, depending on I'm here and the defender's here or that. And it was beginning to get better and better and better. So I played for a team in the summer league, a semi-pro team, and I scored more goals in such a short time than I ever did in my life. So my mindset was just score. My skill set was improving. And then the next time that I played for this team, the same thing. My mentality was score. Unfortunately, it's only a summer league, but my ratio of games played to goals scored was even better in my second time. So I played less games, but I scored almost, not the same amount of goals, but almost the same amount of goals. But the ratio was better, goals per game. And this is something that I continue to work on, and obviously there's levels to this. So that's why I'm out all the time. I'm out all the time I can. I'm working on this skill more than any other skill by far. Not just in terms of skill set, but in terms of mentality. So I watch videos of Messi, Ronaldo. These guys are killers. They are straight killers, assassins when it comes to winning. They want to win, they want to score, they want to win, they want to score every single game. There was a period where nothing else matters. It was a competition between them to score goals and win games. So I study this mentality. I continue to study it. I continue to go out and train and train and train. Every finishing session, I'm paying. Let me tell you, I'm broke. I don't have much money. I don't make much money. I have a lot of bills, but I'm paying $50 here, $65 there, $50, 65, 85 working on not just finishing but also fitness, because I have some tryouts for a pro team in a few months. But I'm spending so I'm giving up a lot of other things that other people may waste money on, and I'm saving that money for the skill set that I believe I can get better. And I don't know what's gonna come up. I don't know what's gonna come of this, but I notice that my skill set is getting better and my mentality is getting better. And I believe that I can keep improving even in my 30s. I believe I can keep improving. So to sum it up, the thing is, I mean, I don't care how old I get. I think even in my 30s, I can continue to improve on my mindset if my brain remains open. Most people in their 30s, their mind closes. They don't want to take in the information. They're comfortable where they are. But for me, I remain that childlike thing, that childlike trait, that I have so much to learn, that I'm intrigued by every aspect of this part of the game like a little kid. So I'm willing to learn everything. I'm willing to learn from coaches, from players, from professional players, everything. I soak it in like a little kid. So that's important, man. Just don't ever think that you're stuck in one place. So yeah, man. So no matter what people say, oh, you're too old, oh, you can't learn, I don't care what they say. You know, one of the most important quotes, one of the best quotes I ever heard was, it doesn't matter what's true, it only matters what you believe is true. So even if it's true in the sense that people think it's true that at a certain age you can't learn, or you're done learning, or you're too old, or it's too late, I don't believe that. I'm taking care of my body and what I eat and in my fitness. I'm in my 30s, but I'm doing more fitness training than I ever have in my life. I'm going to continue to do more fitness training. I'm going to eat healthier than I've ever eaten before. I'm going to open my mind up like I've never done before. I'm going to open my mind up like I was when I was a little kid. I'm going to soak in information. I'm going to take information. I'm not going to think that I'm good where I am, that I don't need to change. I'm going to always think that I need to grow, that there's always room for growth. So that's so important, man. That's so important. Obviously, I mean, you can't play until you're 50 years old, but Tom Brady's playing and he's 43, 44, and he's still winning. I'm not gonna lie, he gives me a lot of hope too in what's possible. But for me, man, it's just me. It's just what I believe. It's not what other people believe, it's what I believe. And I don't know how far I can go, but I'm not gonna put a limit on myself. So I'm gonna set a high limit, the highest limit that I possibly can set, and I'm gonna act as if it's possible to reach that limit. That way I'm doing more than I would usually do if I had a lower goal, because I know it requires more to reach the higher goal. Then I'm gonna do more than what I would normally do. But that's it. That's the lesson I have, is just there's always room for growth, no matter how old you are, no matter how you grew up as a kid. There's always room for growth.